Nobody came to my graduation. Not my mother. Not my father. Not even my little sister, Avery. When my name echoed through the stadium speakers, thousands of people clapped for students they loved. Parents stood with flowers. Grandparents wiped tears. Phones rose into the air to capture the moment. But the row marked reserved for family stayed completely empty. The empty silver seats reflected the sunlight so brightly that I had to look away. Camila Elaine Reed, Master of Data Analytics. My legs carried me across the stage automatically. Smile. Shake hands. Take the diploma. Pose for the camera. Everything I had spent 6 years working toward happened in less than 15 seconds. And nobody who mattered was there to see it. The applause faded behind me as I walked off the stage. Around me, students laughed, cried, hugged their families, and posed for hundreds of photos. A girl beside me buried her face in her mother's shoulder. A father lifted his son off the ground. Someone opened champagne. Someone else proposed. Life seemed to be happening everywhere except around me. I stood alone. My phone remained silent. No text. No missed calls. No congratulations. Nothing. Camila. I turned. Ruby, my classmate, rushed toward me carrying flowers. Her parents followed behind her, smiling proudly. You did it. She hugged me tightly. Her mother handed me a flower from Ruby's bouquet. We're so proud of you. I almost cried right there. Not because of the flower. Because a stranger had shown me more kindness in 10 seconds than my own family had in years. Ruby looked around. Where are your parents? The lie came automatically. Traffic. Oh, they'll make it. Yeah. I smiled. I had become very good at pretending. Hours later, the parking lot began to empty. Families loaded balloons into cars. Students took final photographs. The sky turned orange. I sat alone inside my old Honda Civic with the air conditioning running. For a moment, I imagined them walking toward me. My mother carrying flowers. My father smiling. Avery running across the parking lot. We made it. But the vision disappeared as another family drove away. The truth was simple. They had never planned to come. And if I was honest with myself, I had known that all along. This wasn't the first important day they had missed. When I graduated from college 4 years earlier, my mother said Avery had exams. When I got my first internship, nobody asked about it. When I received scholarships, my father simply nodded. When I worked 2 jobs to pay tuition, my mother called asking for money. Always money. Always Avery. Always something else. I was 16 when I got my first job. Every morning at 5:30, I wore a green Starbucks apron and served coffee before school. My hands smelled like espresso and caramel. I worked weekends. I worked holidays. I worked whenever someone called out. And every paycheck disappeared. Avery needs piano lessons. Avery's dance competition is expensive. Your sister needs new clothes. You understand, don't you? I always understood. Because I thought that was what daughters did. I believed sacrifice earned love. I believed if I gave enough, worked enough, and succeeded enough, eventually my parents would finally see me. Eventually they would be proud. Eventually they would choose me. But some children spend their entire lives auditioning for a role that was never theirs. Avery was the star. I was the supporting character. The difference between us began long before either of us understood it. When Avery turned 10, my parents rented a ballroom. There were decorations, a magician, musicians, and over 100 guests. My mother wore a new dress. My father hired photographers. Everyone called Avery their princess. When I turned 18, my birthday cake came from a grocery store clearance shelf. My mother forgot candles. My father left early for work. Avery complained that the movie I picked was boring. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself birthdays were childish. I told myself plenty of people had it worse. But children remember these things. Not because of the gifts. Because of what the gifts mean. Who matters? Who doesn't? Who gets celebrated? Who gets forgotten? My father wasn't cruel. That somehow made everything worse. Cruel people are easy to understand. My father was quiet. Passive. He let my mother make every decision. Whenever she criticized me, he stayed silent. Whenever she demanded money, he looked away. Whenever Avery received everything and I received nothing, he pretended not to notice. Sometimes I caught him watching me. There would be guilt in his eyes. Regret. But guilt without action changes nothing. Silence becomes its own form of betrayal. After graduation, I drove home to my apartment in Denver. It wasn't large. 1 bedroom. Old carpet. Tiny kitchen. Second-hand furniture. But everything inside it belonged to me. The diploma sat on the passenger seat. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. Master of Data Analytics. 2 jobs. Student loans. Years of studying. Years of believing this degree would finally change everything. Maybe now my family would respect me. Maybe now they would be proud. Maybe now. My phone vibrated. I smiled automatically. Finally. I opened the message. It was from my mother. Only 8 words. Need $2,100 for Avery's Sweet 16. That was it. No congratulations. No question about graduation. No apology. No explanation. Just a number. A demand. As if my entire existence could be reduced to a bank account. I read the message again. And again. Something inside me that had spent years begging for love finally became exhausted. Because suddenly I understood. My degree didn't matter. My success didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. To them, I was not a daughter. I was an emergency fund. A backup plan. An ATM with emotions. Outside, the sun slowly disappeared behind the buildings. The apartment grew quiet. For the first time in my life, the silence felt different. Not lonely. Not sad. Just honest. And somewhere deep inside me, a very small voice whispered something I had never allowed myself to hear. What if you stopped giving? I sat there for a long time. Staring at the message. Staring at my diploma. And wondering what my life would look like if I finally chose myself. I stared at my mother's text until the screen went dark. Need $2,100 for Avery's Sweet 16. No congratulations. No pride. No mention of my graduation. Only money. For years I would have answered immediately. Of course, Mom. How much do you need? When do you need it? But something had changed. Maybe it was the empty seats at graduation. Maybe it was the silence of my apartment. Or maybe I had simply become too tired to keep proving that I deserved love. I opened my banking app. My savings account showed just over $3,000. $3,000. That was everything. Years of overtime. Years of skipped vacations. Years of eating instant noodles during finals. Years of telling myself that once I graduated, life would finally become easier. I looked at the amount my mother wanted. $2,100. Almost everything I had. For a birthday party. For Avery. Again. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it finally made sense. I wasn't their daughter. I was their emergency fund. Slowly, I typed in a transfer amount. $1. In the message section, I wrote, "Congratulations, Avery." I pressed send. The notification appeared. Transaction complete. $1. For the first time in my life, I had said no. The apartment became completely quiet. My heart was beating so hard that I could hear it. I expected guilt. I expected panic. Instead, I felt relief. My eyes drifted toward the small key hanging beside the front door. The spare key. The one my mother insisted on keeping. For emergencies, she always said. But emergencies had a strange way of happening whenever she wanted something. Sometimes she entered while I was at work. Sometimes she rearranged my kitchen. Sometimes she checked my mail. Once, she even let Avery stay in my apartment without asking me. I had convinced myself it was normal. Family. Trust. Love. But standing there, looking at that key, I realized something. People who respect your boundaries don't demand copies of your life. I took the key off the hook, held it in my hand, and dropped it into the trash. That evening, I called a locksmith. An older man named Walter arrived around 7. His truck rattled when it stopped outside. His toolbox looked older than I was. "You changing apartments?" he asked. "No. Break-in." I hesitated. "No." He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded. "Sometimes people just need a new lock." Something in his voice made me believe he understood more than he said. The old lock came out easily. The new one clicked into place. Metal against metal. Simple. Final. When he handed me the new keys, they felt strangely heavy. "Only give these to people you trust," he said. I almost laughed. There weren't many people left. That night I slept better than I had in years. No anxiety. No expectation. No fear that someone would enter without permission. The next morning sunlight filled the apartment. I made coffee, opened my laptop, started updating my resume. For several hours, everything felt peaceful. Then my phone started ringing. Mom. Decline. Mom. Decline. Dad. Decline. Mom. Decline. Text messages began arriving. "Why are you ignoring me? Where's the money? Your sister is crying. Answer your phone. After everything we've done for you." I placed the phone face down. For the first time, their words didn't control me. But they still hurt. Because part of me still wanted my mother to ask, "How was graduation? Are you okay? I'm proud of you." Instead, she wanted money. Again. 3 days passed. The apartment remained peaceful. I began applying for jobs. I updated my LinkedIn profile. I framed my diploma. Little by little, I started imagining a future that belonged to me. Then someone knocked on my door. 3 hard knocks. Slow. Professional. I frowned. Mrs. Patel, my landlord, always called first. I walked quietly toward the door. Looked through the peephole. 2 police officers stood outside. My blood turned cold. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I opened the door carefully. "Miss Camilla Reed." "Yes." The taller officer spoke calmly. "We received a wellness concern call." "A what?" "Your mother reported that you've been behaving erratically, stopped answering your phone, changed your locks, and may be a danger to yourself." I stared at him. Then I stared at the second officer. Neither spoke. Neither smiled. And suddenly I understood. My mother had called the police. Because I said no. Because I changed my locks. Because I finally set one boundary. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. "Would it be okay if we came inside?" the officer asked gently. I stepped aside. The apartment was spotless. Coffee sat on the counter. My laptop displayed job applications. Books lined the shelves. My framed diploma rested against the wall. The officers looked around. One asked simple questions. "Are you employed? Recently graduated? Any medical concerns? No. Feeling unsafe? No. Any thoughts of harming yourself? No." I answered calmly. Honestly. After several minutes, the older officer nodded. "You seem perfectly fine." "I am." He glanced toward the diploma. "Master's degree?" "Yes." "Congratulations." The word hit harder than I expected. Congratulations. A stranger had said it before my own family. I felt tears threatening. I blinked them away. The officer noticed. But he didn't mention it. As they prepared to leave, the younger officer paused at the doorway. Sometimes people react badly when they lose control. I looked at him. He continued. "It happens more than you'd think." The door closed behind them, and I stood there alone, shaking. Not from fear. From anger. My mother had used the police. She had tried to make me look unstable. She wanted authority to force me back into line. Because daughters who say no are dangerous. Because daughters with boundaries become difficult to control. That night I couldn't sleep. The police report sat in my email. The apartment felt different. Not unsafe. Just exposed. If my mother was willing to do this, what would she do next? I replayed years of conversations. Every guilt trip. Every demand. Every sacrifice. And slowly, something uncomfortable began to surface. Maybe this wasn't love. Maybe it never had been. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. The city lights glowed softly through the darkness. For years I had believed silence meant loneliness. But now the silence felt like a warning. A storm was coming. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew my mother wasn't finished. Not yet. The morning after the police visit, I woke up before sunrise. Rain still clung to the windows. The apartment felt unusually quiet. For the first time in days, my phone hadn't received a single text from my mother. No accusations. No guilt. No demands. That silence should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. Because my mother never stopped fighting when she didn't get what she wanted. She simply changed strategies. I made coffee and opened my laptop. My plan was simple. Apply for jobs. Move forward. Forget the drama. Forget the police. Forget my family. But before opening my email, I decided to check my bank account. A decision that changed everything. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Checking account. Savings. Recent transactions. Then I noticed 2 notifications. Credit inquiry detected. My stomach tightened. I clicked the alert. One inquiry from Capital One. Another from Discover. Both recent. Both unfamiliar. I frowned. I had not applied for any credit cards. I opened my credit report. And suddenly my entire body went cold. 2 accounts. Opened under my name. Thousands of dollars charged. My social security number. My information. But one address. My parents' house. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. I kept reading. Party supplies. Event deposits. Decorations. DJ services. Photography. Everything connected to one event. Avery's 16th birthday. My mother's text suddenly echoed in my mind. Need $2,100 for Avery's Sweet 16. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. Because while she had been asking me for money, she had already taken it. I sat perfectly still. The coffee beside me grew cold. My hands began to shake. Part of me wanted to believe there was a mistake. A misunderstanding. An accident. But deep down, I already knew. My mother knew my social security number. She knew my personal information. She had handled my college paperwork years ago. She had access to everything. And now she had used my identity. For a birthday party. For Avery. Again. The golden child had received another gift. This time, it had cost me my name. I called the credit card company. After several minutes of verification, a representative answered. Can you confirm your address? I gave my apartment address. She paused. Our records show a Littleton address. My parents' house. Another pause. Would you like to report fraud? The word felt enormous. Fraud. Not misunderstanding. Not family problems. Fraud. Yes. The representative's voice became professional. We'll freeze the accounts immediately. I closed my eyes. Who opened them? More typing. Then. The application includes Linda M. Reed. My mother. There it was. No doubt. No confusion. No misunderstanding. She had signed her own name beside mine. She hadn't just borrowed money. She had stolen my identity. That afternoon I sat alone in my apartment. For years I had defended her. Excused her. Protected her. But the truth sat on my computer screen. My own mother had become a stranger. The woman who packed my school lunches. The woman who braided my hair. The woman who kissed my forehead when I was little. She had looked at my name and decided it belonged to her. I cried. Not because of the money. Because grief finally arrived. The grief of realizing the mother I kept trying to earn had never existed. Then I remembered something. Colorado allowed one-party consent recordings. A person could legally record conversations they participated in. My hands stopped shaking. For the first time in days, I felt calm. I opened my voice recorder, pressed record, and called my mother. She answered immediately. "So you finally decided to answer?" Her voice sounded annoyed. Not worried. Not concerned. Annoyed. "Mom," I said quietly, "I found 2 credit cards under my name." Silence. Then, "Oh, those." My chest tightened. "You knew. I was helping you." "Helping me? You need credit history." I almost laughed. "The cards are maxed out. Family uses family resources. My identity isn't a resource." She sighed dramatically. "You always make everything difficult. Did you open those accounts?" "I handled paperwork." "Did you use my information?" "Camila, stop being dramatic." My voice became cold. "The bank is investigating." The silence that followed was immediate. Heavy. Dangerous. "What?" "I reported the accounts." "You did what?" "I reported fraud." Her breathing changed. "You wouldn't do that to your own mother." I stared out the window. Rain slowly slid down the glass. "No," I said softly. "You already did it to your daughter." Then I ended the call. The recording saved automatically. I named the file. Boundaries. For several minutes I simply sat there. Years of fear had disappeared. Not because I was stronger. Because the truth was stronger. And truth has a way of making fear smaller. 2 days later, my father called. I answered. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Finally he said, "Your mother says there's been a misunderstanding." I laughed. A tired laugh. "Dad, she stole my identity." He sighed. "She didn't mean." "Stop." He became quiet. "Did you know?" Another silence. Longer this time. I knew she opened something. My heart broke. Not because he admitted it. Because he had known. And done nothing. Again. Just like every other time. "I trusted you." His voice sounded small. "We can fix this privately." "No. Camila." "No." For the first time in my life, I interrupted my father. "The bank already knows." The line became silent. "Please don't do this." I didn't. I hung up. That evening I received a text. "Meet us tomorrow. We need to talk." My mother. No apology. No regret. Only a command. But this time, things were different. Because I wasn't the girl working at Starbucks anymore. I wasn't the teenager begging for approval. I wasn't the daughter trying to earn love. I was a woman whose name had been stolen. And tomorrow, for the first time in my life, I was going to look my family in the eyes and tell them exactly what they had done. Outside, the storm finally ended. Sunlight broke through the clouds. It touched my framed diploma, the new lock on my door, and the phone containing my mother's confession. 3 pieces of proof. Proof that I had worked for my future. Proof that I had protected my home. And proof that the truth had finally begun. The diner sat halfway between my apartment and my parents' house. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. The kind of place where people lowered their voices because strangers were listening. I arrived 15 minutes early. The smell of coffee and fried food filled the air. Rain clouds still hung over Denver, turning the windows gray. I sat in a booth near the back and waited. My hands trembled slightly. Not because I was afraid. Because I finally understood that this meeting would change everything. The bell above the door rang. My mother entered first. She wore sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. My father followed behind her. Smaller than I remembered. Older. And Avery walked beside them, staring at her phone. No one smiled. No one hugged me. My mother sat down. "You've caused enough drama." Not hello. Not how are you. Just blame. I looked at her calmly. We're not here to fight. She crossed her arms. Then why are we here? I slid a folder across the table. Bank statements. Credit reports. Fraud documents. Phone records. The recording transcript. My mother barely glanced at them. This is ridiculous. Those accounts are under my name. I was helping you. You stole my identity. Avery finally looked up. Mom said you agreed. I turned toward my sister. I never agreed. Her face changed. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. My mother immediately interrupted. Your sister has always been jealous. My father lowered his head. I looked at him. Dad, did you know? He didn't answer. My mother answered for him. Your father doesn't need to be involved. He already is. The waitress brought coffee. No one touched it. The silence between us became heavy. For years I had imagined this moment. I thought I would scream, cry, accuse them. But instead, I felt strangely calm. Because the truth no longer needed my anger. The truth already existed. My father finally spoke. We can settle this privately. I shook my head. The bank is already investigating. My mother's face changed. What? The fraud report has been filed. You reported me. Her voice rose loud enough that nearby customers looked over. You stole my identity. I am your mother. And I was your daughter. The words landed between us. Heavy. Painful. True. My mother stared at me. For the first time in my life, she looked afraid. Not angry. Afraid. Because control had finally disappeared. You'll destroy this family. I looked at her quietly. No. My voice barely rose above a whisper. You destroyed it when you decided my name was worth more than my love. Nobody spoke. Even Avery remained silent. I stood up, placed money on the table, and walked away. My mother called my name. I didn't stop. My father said, Camila. I kept walking. Because sometimes healing begins when you refuse to turn around. That evening Avery's Sweet 16 began. Purple decorations. Expensive flowers. A large ballroom. Professional photographers. A DJ. Everything my mother always wanted. Everything purchased using my identity. I sat alone in my apartment. Tea rested beside me. Rain touched the windows. At 8:43 p.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Reed. Yes. This is the Fraud Investigation Department regarding your case. My heart slowed. We wanted to inform you that investigators are verifying charges associated with the event tonight. The event. Avery's party. You don't need to attend. We simply wanted to notify you. The call ended. I sat quietly. I felt no joy. No excitement. Only sadness. Because revenge had never been my goal. I only wanted my life back. 40 minutes later, Avery texted me. What did you do? Another message. People are asking questions. Another. Mom is crying. I didn't answer. For years I had answered every call. Every demand. Every emergency. Tonight, silence became my answer. At the ballroom, investigators reviewed payment records. Questions were asked. Documents examined. Names verified. Guests whispered. The celebration slowly disappeared beneath confusion. My mother stood beside the decorations she had spent months planning. For the first time, there was nobody left to blame. No excuses. No manipulation. Only consequences. Avery sat quietly. My father looked exhausted. And the truth finally stood in the center of the room where nobody could ignore it. 3 days later, the investigation ended. The accounts were frozen. The debts were transferred. My name was cleared. The official email arrived that morning. Simple. Professional. Final. I printed it. Placed it beside my diploma. Beside the locksmith receipt. 3 papers. 3 victories. My education. My protection. My freedom. Weeks passed. My mother continued calling. I never answered. My father left several messages. I listened to none of them. Avery texted once. I didn't know. I believed her. But I didn't reply. Because healing sometimes requires distance. Even from people who are sorry. 6 months later, autumn arrived. The trees turned gold. The air became cool. And I started my new job at a data analytics company. My co-workers celebrated my first promotion. My manager congratulated me. Friends invited me to dinner. People began loving me without asking for anything in return. One evening, I returned home after work. My apartment was quiet. Peaceful. The old lock rested on a shelf. My diploma hung beside my employee badge. The woman staring back at me in the window looked different. Not because life had become perfect, but because she had finally chosen herself. I made tea, opened the window, and listened to the city below. For years I thought silence meant loneliness. But now I understood. Silence can also mean freedom. The freedom to breathe. The freedom to heal. The freedom to stop earning love that was never offered. Some families break your heart. Some families teach you your worth. And sometimes, losing the wrong people is the only way to find yourself. Nobody came to my graduation. At the time, I thought that was the saddest day of my life. I was wrong. Because their absence gave me something they never could. A reason to stop waiting. A reason to stop begging. A reason to finally change the locks. And choose myself.